Hi, my name is Brooke Sanford. I am a senior at Queens this year, and I'm also an elementary education major. So, the topic I decided to focus on this semester is upward mobility. I chose this topic because of just my interest in conversations that have happened in class, conversations I've had with my professors in the education department, and just the information that I've learned on the news about the sort of mobility crisis that Charlotte is in. So, by definition, upward mobility is the action of moving up in social class or status. So, to give you an example, consider the scenario of an individual who was born into a low income family. When they are adults, they're able to find a good job, provide for their family, and do better financially than their parents. And so, a lot of the information I'm going to talk about today and a lot of the statistics come from Charlotte and Mecklenburg County specifically. A 2018 report that was done by the World Bank showed that upward mobility has really stalled in many parts of the world, especially in developing countries. Two regions that have some of the world's most poorest people is Africa and South Asia, and they, on average, have the lowest mobility. In some African countries, the study shows that only 12% of young adults today have more education than their parents, which is not a lot at all, which backs up the idea that upward mobility has stalled in many parts of the world. So, the conversation of mobility and upward mobility started coming up in Charlotte around 2014 when a study was completed by researchers out of Harvard and USC Berkeley. What they did was they analyzed the 50 largest cities in the United States and they ranked them based on upward mobility. Out of the 50 cities, Charlotte was ranked dead last. We are 50 out of 50 in upward mobility. This means that people who are born into poverty in our city have a more difficult time getting out of it than any other large city in the United States. So, after this report came out, one of the first outcomes was the creation of the Opportunity Task Force. Um, this was a group of 20 diverse individuals who were hand selected to study the intergenerational poverty and its negative effects on the life trajectory of families, specifically in Mecklenburg County. Mecklenburg County was also ranked 99 out of 100 in upward mobility. An outcome of this 18-month study was the Opportunity System Strategy. This strategy breaks down 3 determinants and 2 cross-cutting factors on the opportunity trajectory of an individual. The 3 biggest determinants were early care and education, college and career readiness, and child and family stability. The 2 cross-cutting factors were identified as social capital and the impacts of segregation. So, what I'm going to talk about next is more details about each of the determinants and the factors and their relation to Mecklenburg County. So, first, early care and education. Quality early care and education lays the foundation for an individual to complete high school and post-secondary education while simultaneously decreasing the likelihood for the need of public assistance and contact with the criminal justice system. Additionally, children who attend a high-quality preschool program are less likely to repeat grades in school, less likely to get in trouble with the law, and earn approximately $2,000 per month than individuals who did not attend. Just to give some statistics on these segregations in our school system and CMS, 1 of 2 schools are segregated by race, 1 of 3 schools are segregated by poverty, and 1 of 5 schools are hyper-segregated with 90% of students from a particular race. Throughout this video, you will hear me reference a lot about the segregation in relation to each factor, which is why segregation is one of the cross-cutting factors. Another way in which our city is divided and segregated is in school performance. And so if you look at a map of Mecklenburg County, you will see the hyper-concentrated areas of poverty in our area are also have the high or the lowest performance record in schools. And so these are schools that are ranked C, D, and F, all in the same areas where you will find the majority minority population and the lower income neighborhoods. The schools that are ranked A or B, you will find that that is where the more affluent and white neighborhoods and white communities are. The next factor is child and family stability. So there are many complex factors that can impact family stability and create stressful living situations for children. The Opportunity Task Force report came up with 8 interrelated factors that were identified to have the greatest impact on child and family stability. The first one is family structure. The research suggests that a child that is raised by 2 parents outperforms their peers who are raised in a single parent household. So this highlights the importance of family structure and specifically children who are being raised by 2 parents versus 1. The next is family formation, and this is access to reproductive health information and care and the essential role that that plays in the stability of a family. The next one is financial security. Not having sufficient income to afford food, housing, transportation, childcare, or other basic needs can be stressful and can also lead to the destabilizing of a family. Another factor was access to affordable housing. I think, as we all know, it's all over the news all the time that our house prices are raising, and due to the low incomes, this causes families to move, which in a lot of cases can result in an unsafe living environment and also homelessness. The next factor is public transportation. Many families rely on public transportation to get their children to school, to work, to the grocery store, wherever it may be, and multiple destinations can cause serious challenges. The next one is mental health. Living in chronic stress and anxiety of financial instability can create a psychological burden on low-income parents and children. Involvement in criminal justice system. Racial and ethnic disparities in relation to our current levels of mass incarceration, particularly in young African American males. The last factor in child and family stability is accessing community services and support. So human support systems and programs are often not coordinated, lack common goals, and are challenging to navigate. This is a big topic that I talked with one of my interviewers about, is how there are many programs in Charlotte-Mecklenburg that are trying to tackle a wide variety of issues. And say, for example, human trafficking. There are a lot of programs that are trying to essentially reach the same goal of stopping human trafficking from happening in our area or in whatever area they may be working. But the issue with these programs is that, say there are 5 programs working to solve the same issue. Well, the programs are working in silos, and so basically they are fighting for resources, they are fighting for money, and they're basically in competition with one another. And so one of the organizations that I interviewed was For Charlotte, or For CLT. And what they're trying to do is to combine all of the churches together to create this sort of bigger impact, to combine all of the resources, to get all hands on deck to solve mobility. But one of their big things is to get all the churches that are working in silos and bring them together, because then they're able to share resources, they're able to share money to solve the same problem. So going back to child and family stability, I'm just going to read a couple facts about the family structures in Mecklenburg County. So there are over 41,000 single-parent households in Mecklenburg. 35% of households with children are single-parent households. Between 1970 and 2015, there has been a 22% decrease in married individuals. And perhaps the most frightening statistic is that one out of three of all single moms in Mecklenburg County, which is over 12,000, are all living in poverty. The next factor I'm going to talk about in upward mobility is one of the cross-cutting ones, and it is social capital. Social capital is the idea of it's not what you know, but it's who you know. The reality is that children who grow up in low opportunity neighborhoods or attend high poverty schools are on an uneven playing field compared to others who grow up in high opportunity or more affluent neighborhoods. This means that some children do not have the relationships or experiences that could help them see possibilities outside of their circumstances. Relationships and networks enable people to connect to resources, ideas, information, support, and opportunity. One of the people that I interviewed gave the scenario of, say, little Johnny wants to become a lawyer, but he is in a high poverty school, which lacks resources, which lacks mentorships, which lacks information, support, whatever it may be. But because little Johnny doesn't know anyone who doesn't know anyone that's a lawyer, he has less of a chance of finding out that information and pursuing his dream. Where, say, little Johnny goes to a school where they do have access to that information, and say he knows somebody that knows somebody that knows a lawyer, who then they can put them in contact with little Johnny, and then he can get the information he needs to become a lawyer. And so that's pretty much what social capital is. It's just this connection of people and resources and how that can help an individual or families move up in mobility. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Charlotte's history of segregation. Segregation is another one of the cross-cutting factors, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important and one of the biggest factors when it comes to an individual's upward mobility. I grew up in Charlotte. I've lived here since I was 4, and throughout this research process and studying Charlotte's history of segregation and how it's still relevant today, it was a little frightening, but at the same time not surprising. So in 1910, black and white areas were created across the 4 wards that formed our city. So our city still consists of 1st Ward, 2nd Ward, 3rd Ward, and 4th Ward. Federal financial resources poured in during that time to support racial discrimination of our African American communities. At the same time, federal redlining prohibited these families from getting loans and prevented them from buying their homes. During the time of urban renewal, which was during the 1950-1960s, many African American neighborhoods were demolished with no replacement of housing, and the purpose of this was to build 2 interstates and I-277. One neighborhood that was affected by urban renewal that I actually learned about in one of my QLCs was the Brooklyn neighborhood. During the time around 1950s, Brooklyn was a thriving African American community where children were going to school, and there were a lot of job opportunities for the community members. And during the time of urban renewal, they basically came in and kicked all the families out, wiped out their homes, and gave them no other place to live, no replacement of housing. Just a fun fact, there are still, I want to say 3 or 4 buildings from the original Brooklyn neighborhood that are still standing today. Segregation, going from talking about the history to now, segregation is really the foundation of upward mobility. Because Charlotte has such a deep history of segregation, it has continued to manifest in our communities and neighborhoods, and even some systematic processes that are still happening today. We are segregated by a lot of things. wealth and poverty, race and ethnicity, school quality, school performance, social capital, a lot of things. We are segregated by a lot of factors. And the geographical data continues to show that we have a separate and unequal pattern in predominantly white and wealthy neighborhoods to the south of Charlotte and southeast, and lower opportunity neighborhoods that wrap around the center of our city. And so a lot of this data, when you look at Mecklenburg County specifically, you can see the segregation, even when looking at, for example, race. Around the center of our city, you will see that 77 to 100% of our minority population reside around the center of our city. You will see that the lower income neighborhoods all wrap around the center of our city. And then the areas of school performance that I spoke about earlier, where they are ranked A or B, so some of the highest performing schools in our area, the more wealthy residents of our city live in those areas where the schools are ranked higher. And some current local and global recommendations for change that are happening today in Mecklenburg County. One, they are working to make universal preschool with the idea that all children deserve the right to a quality education. And universal preschool would really be an essential investment to ensure that all students, all of our children, have access to quality early childhood care and education. And the goal of this would really be to close the opportunity gap that's present in our schools today. Research has shown that these children who do not go to preschool, or they do not go to a quality preschool, when they show up on day one of kindergarten, they are already behind their peers. And again, the research has shown when the children come in behind their peers, it is very, very difficult for them to catch up. Not to say that it's impossible, but the trend of this research is that it's very hard for them to catch up to their peers and get on grade level. And that has many, many effects. For example, when children are not on grade level, reading grade level by third grade, the percent of them not graduating high school and dropping out triples. I mean, it's almost a direct correlation. When they are not on grade level by third grade, they don't graduate. They don't typically get there. And so that just goes back to my point of how important it is to give all children an even playing field so that they can, so we can really prevent the opportunity gap before the children walk in kindergarten on day one. The next recommendation that, again, is being worked on right now, not just in Mecklenburg County, but all around the U.S., is affordable housing. On the news all the time, it talks about how we are in an affordable housing crisis. Families are not able to afford housing. The wages are so low, and it's resulting in a lot of homelessness, a lot of family homelessness. And so affordable housing would really help working families to become stabilized and prevent family homelessness, while at the same time preventing children from being moved from school to school. And so when these families are having to move from house to house, or from a car to a hotel, or whatever their situation may be, these children oftentimes are moving schools. And even if they're not moving schools, they are missing days of school. And so at the end of the day, they are losing some of their education that is really difficult to get back, especially when their attendance levels continue to decrease. The next one is increasing the public transportation options. And so our busing transportation in Charlotte, otherwise known as the CAT system, has already begun to make amazing changes in their system. They have cut down the travel time by 15%. Before, it was taking travelers to get from point A to point B, the average travel time being 2 hours. And so what CATS did was Instead of having buses at routes every hour, the buses are now coming around every 30 minutes, and again has resulted in a 15% decrease in time. And so that really helps the families that depend on the public transportation to get their children to school, to get themselves to work, to go to the grocery store, whatever that may be. And so I want to end just on a quote from the Opportunity Task Force report that really exemplifies why upward mobility is so important at both the local and the global level. So this quote reads, "Not only is it a moral imperative, it is an economic necessity when considering implications such as increased cost related to healthcare, criminal justice, and social services, employers being deprived of potential employees and customers, and the political instability likely to worsen if the gap between the haves and the have-nots continue to grow." So, to summarize mobility and the importance of it in general is that opportunity can really change the lives of individuals and families. And when the opportunity is not there, the economy, either in the United States or all around the world, becomes very stagnant, and it leads to the creation of a very unequal society where members are being left behind and they're unable to provide for themselves and their families. All children deserve the right to a quality education. It's a human right. Everyone deserves access to a quality education. And when the children who are born into poverty aren't given the same opportunities and resources, then that can have serious implications on their life trajectory and prevent them from ending their cycle of poverty. We always say that children are our future, and that's very true. The success of our country and the world depends on our children today. But it's not until that we take the actions and initiatives to end the concentrated poverty, not just in Mecklenburg County, not just in Charlotte, say even in Africa or South Asia, where their mobility has also become very stagnant. And so, yeah, when we all can thrive, then our world will be a much better place. Thank you.